Yesterday, we finished reviewing the intention of goodwill, or in Pali terms, metta, translated in English as loving kindness. Today, we are going to explore the intention of harmlessness, which is guided by compassion. How is compassion different from loving kindness? Compassion supplies complement to loving kindness. The difference is that loving kindness has the characteristic of wishing for the happiness and welfare of others. Compassion, instead, has the characteristics of wishing that others be free from suffering. Same with metta. This wish is to be extended without limits to all living beings. How to start developing compassion? It springs up by considering all beings, like ourselves, wish to be free from suffering. Yet, despite their wishes, continue to be harassed by pain, fear, sorrow, and other forms of dukkha. I recall this is what Ajahn Brahmali said. This is the greatest tragedy of humanity. We all want happiness. We all look for happiness, but we all get dukkha instead. Why? Because we look for happiness in the wrong place. And this is also the power of Buddhism. Then Buddhism points us to the happiness in the right place. How can we start to develop compassion as meditative exercise? We can start with somebody who is actually undergoing suffering. Because when someone is undergoing suffering, he or she becomes a natural grounding for compassion, natural object to arouse compassion. We contemplate this person's suffering either directly or imaginatively, and reflects like us, he or she also wants to be free. Free from what? Free from suffering. The recent case, I think, if you recall, there are a twin, 11-year-old boys who was discovered as motionless. Yeah? I forget the exact location, but it was in Singapore, in some kind of a park. Yeah? And then at that age, I don't think they expect to be, just lying down motionless. Yeah. So when I read the news, I was so shocked that a little bit of compassion arises in me. Yeah. So one way you can do this is when you read the news and then you see some tragedy. Yeah, I think that is one way to arouse compassion. When you see a lot of people are suffering, through the lens of reading the news. And this is how I normally, the attitude that I read the news is to find out, not intentionally to find out like, oh, this guy is like, suffering or troubling, but just to be aware that this is actually happening all around the world, and not just in Singapore. Because sometimes we like to shield ourselves, from all of this, pretend to know that, pretend to think that none of this actually happening, and it will never happen to us. Yeah, but the truth is, maybe someday we could be appearing in the news as well when certain tragedies hit us. Yeah. The one that I recall clearly, a lady just having a run in the park, and then a tree falls upon her, and then she just passed away like that. Yeah, so it's so random that feels like anything can happen. Okay, back to the text. Yeah, that is one way you can see or use as a ground for suffering. Yeah, the papers. Okay, this explores further and how we can radiate turns to different individuals. Consider how they are each exposed to suffering. And then we radiate the feeling of compassion to them. Yeah. In my case, it's the people that I've read in the news. And then we can increase the breadth and the intensity of compassion. It is helpful to contemplate the various sufferings to which living beings are susceptible. Sometimes in the road, there's one time when I walk around and then I see a cat lying motionless. When I take a look closer, it was actually being run over by a car. So animals, stray animals around the street, they are also really susceptible towards all of these accidents. This is one way to contemplate the suffering of living beings, especially the animals. Okay, one guideline that you can use is the first noble truth with different aspects of dukkha and how people can suffer due to old age, due to sickness, death, also sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair, and so forth. Yeah, when you can successfully generate compassion, another way to arouse compassion, you can also consider people who are enjoying happiness, but they acquire their wealth through immoral means. The recent news again, those scammers, they receive a lot of money, but by deceiving people, and it's not a small amount, some more. Yeah, sure, they get to enjoy their money, but they acquire it by scamming people, by deceit, by some kind of advanced technological trickery. You can reflect that those people, despite their fortune, their superficial fortune, are doubtlessly troubled deep within by the pangs of conscience. And you can also see this manifest directly when they have, all these fears of getting caught because you have done such a huge, a massive scam. And then people, especially the police of Singapore, they would look for you. And then it would manifest in fear inside of them. And whenever, let's say, they walk around the street, they have to be careful every time. They are afraid every time. They might get arrested at any point. Yeah. Imagine living like that. I cannot ever live in peace when I know Or there's a possibility that I might get arrested at any point or any day in time. Huh? How can you possibly live peacefully when you have that fear? Here it says, even if they display no outward signs of this inner distress, yeah, the one that I mentioned, the fear, one knows that they will eventually reap the bitter fruits of their evil deeds, which will bring them intense suffering. Okay, the widest compassion that we can do, we can include all living beings, and then that all living beings are subject to the universal suffering of samsara, driven by the greed, aversion, and delusion through rounds of repeated birth and death. This one you will notice appears quite often in the sutta, that even total strangers on the street, in this beginningless cycle of rebirth, it is difficult to find a single being who has not at some time been one's own mother, father, sister, brother, son, or daughter. Yeah, what does this mean? In our past lives, yeah, all of you have been my mother before. Yeah, I don't know which past life, but all of you have been my mother at some point in my past life. And all of you have been my father before at some point in my past life. All of you have been my sister before. All of you have been my brother, my son, my daughter before. How is that possible? Because this cycle of rebirth has been going on. The praise here from the sutta, since the beginningless of time. In the modern place, we can say it has been going on forever. So that's why when there's so many permutations within very long lifespan, then at some point, all of you will, it is possible that at some point, all of you were my family, my close family. Yeah, highly possible. Okay, this is the summary. There are three kinds of right intention. Firstly, renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. Each of them counteracts the three wrong intentions. What are the wrong intentions? The first one, desire, ill will, and harmfulness. The importance of putting this into practice, leading to arising of these intentions, these thoughts cannot be overemphasized. This contemplation is not just theoretical excursions, but it is taught as methods for cultivation. To develop the intention of renunciation, we have to contemplate the suffering tied up with the quest for worldly enjoyment. To develop the intention of goodwill, we have to consider how everyone, all beings, desire happiness. And the last one, to develop intention of harmlessness or compassion, we consider that all beings wish to be free from suffering. The unwholesome thought is like a rotten peg lodged in the mind. The wholesome thought is like a new peg suitable to replace it. The contemplation functions as the hammer used to drive out the old peg with a new one. The work of driving in the new peg is practicing again and again as often as is necessary to reach success. The Buddha gives us assurance, his assurance that the victory can be achieved. whatever one reflects upon, he says, becomes the inclination of the mind. When you reflect upon it again and again, frequently, that will be your inclination of the mind. Yeah, this is so true. If one frequently thinks sensual, hostile, harmful thoughts, desire, ill will, and harmfulness will become the inclination of the mind. Yeah. If one frequently thinks in the opposite way, renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness become the inclination of the mind. Taken from Majjhima Nikaya 19. It concludes by saying the direction we take always comes back to ourselves, to the intentions we generate moment by moment in the course of our lives. That sums up the intention of harmlessness, also the intention, the second factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, right intention. Any questions or comments?
Marcel?
Yes.
Yeah, just now when you are sharing about the story on about the cat that you saw on the street, so I'm just wondering, well, if we see insects like cockroach and ants, yeah, I think it might be hard, but I think we can also try, yeah, to develop compassion for those beings as well.
That's true. That's true. In fact, I actually had conversation with Shifu. I kind of pressed him about. I asked him about mosquito. Shifu, isn't mosquito harmful to us? Then isn't it? Yeah. It's probably a cheeky question, but I was genuinely curious. Yeah. If mosquito can kill us with all this dengue or malaria, then isn't it better if we just, yeah, squat them away? Okay. The way he answered it was basically, firstly, not all mosquitoes bring diseases. Only a very specific kind of mosquito. And then he mentioned, if we were to kill all mosquitoes just because a few mosquitoes brings diseases, then it's also like, killing a specific group of people just because we stereotype them or that they are criminals, so to speak, for example. Yeah. The discussion was more in depth, but this was one of the points that he mentioned. Thanks for adding on, Sister Singhui. For ants, my friend's parents has the habit of when they see a line of ants, then there is a temptation to just wipe the ants away because they don't like the sight of it and they don't want to see the place cleaned. But I also have a friend that tells other friend not to kill ants because they don't do any harms to you at all. They're so small, they cannot even do anything to you. Yeah. Maybe you will get bitten occasionally, but I have never get bitten by ants in Singapore. Yeah. So far as I can recall. But by saying that to her friends, I think her friends stopped to kill ants. As a result, she saves like thousands of lives if you put it in terms of quantity. Okay, anyone else have any comments or questions?
Maybe I just say a few words. So, what I was thinking about during the sharing is how I feel like one point that was sort of missed was really the contemplation of our own dukkha. I feel like the place for the generation of true compassion comes when we understand our own dukkha to the point where we see the amount of suffering that we are in. Like, we are all capable of flaws, we are all capable of making mistakes. And to understand the universality of that, because the reason why we're making all of these stupid mistakes or the things that we do is because of our ignorance, of our greed, hatred, and whatever. And recognizing the universality of that greed, hatred, and delusion, if we are able to see that in every single one of us, and we see how we are all bounded, it's like driven by all of these things, then we start to have compassion for everyone. Even the mosquitoes or the cockroaches, they are like exactly like us. They don't even know that they're in that state. In that moment, how can you have anger towards them? And I feel like every teaching of the Buddha relates back to the idea of this non-self, and you start to have lesser judgment towards things, and you open your heart to things because you realize how foolish it is to hold that sense of self, to hold that judgment towards someone just because they don't know better, or like they are doing simply what they have been conditioned to do. So in that moment, you really have compassion. So I feel like the way to generate compassion then has got to link back to the contemplation of one's dukkha and the understanding of this self. So yes, that's what I wanted to add on.
Okay, thanks for adding on Chip. Yeah, that's very true. Okay, second. Yeah, I saw you unmuted, no? Oh no. Yeah, that's very true. Animals like us also wants to be free from suffering, and like Anjay mentioned, we are capable of making mistakes even as humans. So much more. What about animals? Yeah, they don't even know that all of this can happen to them. All they want is just to get food, find food and find some other animals to be mated with. But they are very susceptible to all this universal suffering, as what Onchit has mentioned. Thanks for adding on, Onchit. Anyone else would like to add? If not, let's do a sharing of merits. Let's share the merits to the Devas, the Buddhas, the Nagas, the dragon spirits, and to all beings. Wishing them to rejoice in the merits to protect the Buddha Sasana, to protect the world, to protect ourselves and others. Akasata Jabumata Devana Gamahidika Punyang Tang Anumoditwa Chirang Rakantu Sasanang. Akasata Jabumata Devana Gamahidika Punyang Tang Anumoditwa Chirang Rakantu De Sanang. Akasata Jabumata Devana Gamahidika Punyang Tang Anumoditwa Chirang Rakantu Mang Parang. Etawata Chaamhehi Sambatang Punya Sampadang Sabi Dewa Anumodantu Saba Sampati Siddhya. Etawata Chaamhehi Sambatang Punya Sampadang Sabi Buddha Anumodantu Saba Sampati Siddhya. Etawata Chaamhehi Sambatang Punya Sampadang Sabi Sata Anumodantu Saba Sampati Siddhya. Bawagupadaya Awachi He Tato Etantare satakai upa apana. Rupia rupija asanya sanyino. Dukha pamujantu. Pusantu nibuting. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. Yen xiao san zhang zhu an hao. Yen de zhe hui zhen ming liao. Hu yan zhui zhang xi xiao chu. Shi shi chang xing pu sa da. Amitabha. Till we meet again, may we be guided by the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Have a compassionate Saturday ahead. Thanks everyone for participating. I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.